The wind off the Colorado high country came down hard that October night, sharp enough to crack a man's lip wide open. It crossed 7 miles of frozen valley. It climbed the long cottonwood drive. It pressed against the lit windows of a ranch house that had no business being so quiet. Inside, a woman was setting the supper table. She moved without hurry. Heel to the floorboard, hands steady at the linen. 2 place settings, 3 years of 2 place settings. Then her hand stopped above the second plate. She did not weep. She did not pray. She lifted the plate. She folded the napkin beside it. Corner over corner, the way her mother had taught her in Boston, a lifetime ago. She closed the drawer without a sound. 4 miles down the mountain road, in a lamplit study, a man with a silver pocket watch was lighting a cigar. He did not yet know. The Tuesday she removed his plate from the supper table. The wind off the high Colorado country was sharp enough to crack a man's lip wide open. Cordelia Whitmore did not feel the wind. She felt nothing. She walked into the dining room of the Hawthorne Ranch House. She looked at the 2 settings she had arranged every night for 3 years, and she removed one. She folded his napkin slowly, the same way her mother had taught her in Boston. Corner over corner, crease pressed flat with the heel of her thumb. She put it in the drawer beside the silver. She closed the drawer without a sound. Then she sat down, alone, in a house worth more than most men's lives, and she ate. She did not cry. She had mistaken her own patience for hope. She understood now. It had only been exhaustion wearing hope's clothing. 3 rooms away, the wind rattled a window pane. Outside, the first hard frost of October was already climbing the fence posts. Inside, the woman known to the town as Mrs. Wyatt Hawthorne lifted her fork. She chewed slowly. She swallowed. And somewhere 4 miles up the mountain road, a man named Augustus Thorne was lighting a cigar in his study. He did not yet know that the woman he had sold 3 years ago for a marriage license and a quiet favor was about to start asking questions. He did not know that the answers would cost him his neck.
But that is a story for later. That is the story of why 3 brothers and 1 stranger from
Boston would soon turn this town inside out. That is the story you came here for tonight. So pour yourself something warm. Settle in. Because Cordelia Whitmore has just lifted her chin for the first time in 3 years. And the things she is about to find out will not let any of us look away. If you are new here, hit subscribe. Tell me in the comments what state you are listening from tonight. Then, come back to the dining room. Come back to the woman with the fork in her hand. Because she has just begun. 3 years earlier, Boston, the autumn of 1879. Cordelia Whitmore was 20 years old the morning she learned that the world had decided what her life would be without asking her opinion. The letter came on a Tuesday. She would later wonder if all the worst Tuesdays of her life arrived by mail. Her father had been dead 17 months. Her mother had followed him 6 weeks after the funeral, lying down one evening, complaining of cold hands and never waking up. What remained of the Whitmore household was a brownstone with 3 mortgages, a piano nobody played, and an aunt named Tabitha who smelled of camphor and disapproval. The aunt opened the letter at the breakfast table. She read it twice. She set down her teacup with more care than a teacup deserved. Cordelia, there is a man in Colorado Territory who wishes to marry you. Della looked up from her plate. Who proposes such a thing? A Mr. Augustus Thorne. He says he was a friend of your father's. Della had never heard of any Mr. Augustus Thorne in her life, but she had read enough Boston newspapers to know what it meant when an unknown gentleman wrote to an orphaned girl from a frontier town. It meant arrangements. It meant a price had already been calculated. It meant that somewhere inside this letter was the figure of what her marriage was worth. She read the letter herself. The figure was $3,000. The mortgages combined came to $2,800. "He has bought us," she said quietly. "He has saved us," her aunt corrected. But that night, sitting at the foot of her bed with the letter in her lap, Della heard her aunt's footsteps stop outside her door. Tabitha did not knock. Tabitha did not come in. She only stood there a moment. Then she spoke through the wood. "Cordelia." "Yes, Aunt. Your father did not drink. Not for 15 years before he died. Whatever they tell you in that town, whatever paper they put in front of you, remember that one thing: your father did not drink." The footsteps moved away. Della sat very still. The wind moved the curtain at her window. Outside, Boston went on with its ordinary evening. She would carry her aunt's sentence in her chest like a stone for the next 3 years. She would not understand its weight for a great deal longer than that. 6 weeks later, the train west, the longest journey of her life, though she did not yet know what long meant. She watched the country change through the window. Fields became plains. Plains became rolling brown grass. The grass became scrub. The scrub became mountains. Real mountains. The kind that did not bow to anyone. In her trunk, packed between 2 folded chemises, she carried 3 things she had refused to leave behind. A Bible that had belonged to her mother, a leather-bound journal with all the pages still blank, and an ivory hair comb her father had given her on her 16th birthday, 3 years before his death. The comb was carved from a piece of elephant ivory. The handle was hollow. She did not know that yet either. She arrived in Silver Creek on the 2nd day of November, 1879. The town sat in a high valley in Las Animas County, where 2 creeks met to form a single stream of fast, cold water that ran south through the cottonwoods. The buildings were wooden and weathered. The mountains stood close on 3 sides. The wind smelled of pine smoke and horses and the iron tang of cold air on its way down to becoming snow. A man in a black wool coat was waiting for her at the station. He removed his hat when he saw her. "Miss Whitmore, I am Mayor Augustus Thorne. Welcome to Silver Creek." He was perhaps 50 years old, well-dressed. A heavy silver pocket watch chain ran across his vest. His hands were the soft white hands of a man who had paid other men to do his lifting for him. His eyes, she noticed, were warm. His smile was patient. There was something in the patient smile that made the small hairs at the back of her neck stand up. She did not know why. "My carriage is just here. I will take you directly to the town hall. We do not want to keep your husband waiting." Della took his offered arm. She did not pull away. She did not yet know how to. The town hall sat at the head of the main street, a square white building with a flagpole and a low porch. Inside, the air smelled of pine sap and lamp oil. A clerk waited at a desk. A man in a black coat stood by the window with his back to her. The man at the window turned around. He was tall, taller than the doorway behind him. His shoulders filled out the coat he wore without straining the seams. The build of a man who had earned his strength from work and not from sport. His hair was dark. His jaw was clean-shaved that morning, though the shadow of new beard was already returning. His eyes were gray. Not the soft gray of dove feathers. the gray of clean steel. He looked at her. He looked exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked at the clerk. "Are the papers prepared?" "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne." "Then let us proceed." That was the entire greeting. No smile, no name spoken to her face, no question whether she had survived the journey. Della stood very still and watched a man she had never seen before sign the document that would make her his wife. The clerk read aloud. The mayor witnessed. The bride signed. The groom signed. 14 minutes total. She knew, because she watched the pendulum clock on the wall and counted, because it was the only thing in the room that seemed to be on her side. When it was finished, Augustus Thorne shook the groom's hand. He shook the clerk's hand. He turned to Della and inclined his head. "Mrs. Hawthorne, a pleasure." Wyatt Hawthorne picked up his hat. He walked past her toward the door. At the threshold he paused. He did not turn around. "My wagon is outside, Mrs. Hawthorne. Please come." Then he stepped out into the street. Della stood for a long moment looking at the open doorway. She felt in that moment the first sliver of what would become a familiar feeling. The feeling of being something signed for not something seen. She picked up her own trunk. The clerk hurried forward to take it. She let him. Then she walked out into the November light. The Hawthorne Ranch stood 7 miles up the valley from Silver Creek, at the place where the northern fork of the creek ran past a stand of aspens that turned gold in October and bare white in November. The drive took 2 hours in the wagon. Wyatt did not speak for the first hour. Della did not speak either, because she had been raised to believe that a wife did not begin a conversation her husband did not want. In the second hour, when the sun was already low and the air was already colder than any Boston autumn she had ever known, she spoke once. "Mr. Hawthorne." "Yes." "Forgive me, but should I know what to call you?" "Wyatt is fine, Mrs. Hawthorne." That was the whole conversation. He did not call her Cordelia. He did not call her Della. He called her Mrs. Hawthorne, the name of a woman who had not existed an hour before, and who now apparently was her. She watched his hands on the reins. They were larger than her father's hands had ever been. They were calloused at the base of every finger. There was a thin, pale scar across the back of his left wrist. The kind a man gets from a knife that slipped while skinning something. She decided she would memorize his hands before she would try to memorize his face. The hands seemed more honest. The ranch house appeared at the end of a long drive lined with cottonwoods. It was bigger than she expected. 2 stories, a wraparound porch, a stone chimney at each end. Behind it stood a barn and corrals and the dark shapes of outbuildings she could not yet name. Lamplight burned in the kitchen windows. When the wagon stopped at the porch, the front door opened. A woman of perhaps 50 stepped out, drying her hands on her apron, iron gray hair pinned back, a face that gave away nothing. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hawthorne. My name is Hester Greaves. I run the house. Whatever you need, you ask me." And then the others came, 2 men, stepping out of the lamplight behind Hester. 2 men. Della's breath caught. Because they were Wyatt, both of them, exactly Wyatt, the same height, the same broad shoulders, the same dark hair, the same steel-gray eyes, the same clean-shaved jaw with the same returning shadow. She looked from one to the other, then to her husband, then back to the first one, then back to the second. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. The man on the left wore a red bandana knotted loose at his throat. The man on the right wore a bandana of dark blue. Her husband in the middle wore none. Otherwise, they were the same man printed 3 times. The one in the red bandana spoke first. His voice was deeper than Wyatt's by half a tone, warmer by a full mile. "Welcome, ma'am, Silas Hawthorne, brother of this stone-faced gentleman beside you, the youngest of us by 12 minutes. I apologize on his behalf for everything he has not yet said." Della laughed. She did not mean to. The sound surprised her more than it surprised anyone else. It came out small and tired, but it was a laugh. And it had been a long time since anything in her life had been laughable. Wyatt did not laugh. Wyatt did not even look at his brother. The other one, the one in the blue, did not speak. He only nodded once. Slowly, politely. His eyes did not leave her face. There was something in those eyes that Della would later have no word for. Not yet. "This here," Silas was saying, "is our brother Holt. He does not talk much. Or rather, he does not talk at all. He has not spoken a word in 4 years. But he hears everything, ma'am. So mind what you tell us in front of him." Holt Hawthorne tipped his hat at her. He stepped aside to make room at the door. Della picked up her skirt. She walked between them into the house that would be her home for the next 3 years. She did not know yet that the brother in the blue bandana, the silent one, was the only one of the 3 who would actually see her. She did not know yet that he had been there the night her father died. The first night in the Hawthorne ranch house, Wyatt walked her to a bedroom at the top of the stairs and opened the door. "This is yours, Mrs. Hawthorne. You will find the wardrobe empty. Hester will have your things brought up tomorrow morning. Yours, Mr. Hawthorne." He paused with his hand on the door frame. He did not look at her. At the other end of the hall. He turned to go. "Wait," she said. He stopped. He did turn back just a little. Just enough that she could see the edge of his face in the lamp glow. "I am sorry to ask, Mr. Hawthorne, but what am I to do tomorrow, in this house?" She had expected something cold. She had expected him to tell her that a wife in a house finds her own occupation. She had expected to be left more alone than she already felt, which was very alone indeed. Instead, he was quiet for a moment. "Whatever a woman does to make a place feel like hers, Mrs. Greaves will help you. There is a piece of ground at the east side of the house, against the kitchen wall, that gets the morning sun. Mrs. Greaves has been wanting to put a garden there. Perhaps you might." She nodded. He nodded. He left. She stood in the doorway listening to his boots go down the hall. She listened until she heard the door at the far end shut. Then she went into her bedroom alone and closed her own door. She sat on the edge of the bed in her traveling dress, and she didn't weep. She had been told once by her mother that a woman who could go 3 months without weeping could survive almost anything. Cordelia Whitmore, now Mrs. Wyatt Hawthorne, had not let a tear fall since the funeral. She intended to keep that record intact. She unpinned her hair. She unpacked the Bible, the blank journal, the ivory comb. She set them on the bedside table. She blew out the lamp. Then she lay in the dark in a house full of 3 identical men, and she thought just before sleep took her. "I will plant the garden. I will make a place that is mine, and I will find out before I die who I have actually married." She did not yet know that 2 of those things would prove easier than the third. The first winter, she planted nothing because the ground was frozen. She spent it learning the house instead, where the cold drafts came in around the kitchen window casing. Which floorboard in the upper hallway creaked? Which of the 3 brothers liked his coffee, bitter and black, which liked it cut with cream, which liked it not at all, and drank tea instead? Wyatt drank his black. Silas drank his pale. Holt drank tea. She learned that her husband left the ranch before dawn on most mornings and did not return until after she was asleep. She learned that he rode south, always south, toward the silver workings in the lower canyon. She learned not to ask about silver. She learned not to ask about money. She learned not to ask about anything that lived more than 2 miles from the house. Silas was the brother who filled the silences. He told her stories at supper when Wyatt was not there. Stories about the brothers' boyhood, about the mountain in summer, about the time the youngest of them, who was Silas himself by 12 minutes, had ridden a mule into the kitchen of the original Hawthorne homestead on a dare from their dead father. He could make Hester laugh, which was a feat Della had not believed possible. He could make Della laugh, which was a smaller feat but a more important one. Holt was the brother who watched. He did not write much. He did not need to. He had a way of looking at a person that said more than most people could say with their tongues. He carried a small leather notebook in his breast pocket and a stub of pencil. He used them rarely. He used them, Della began to notice, only when he had something he believed was worth the trouble of writing. In the second week of December, the first heavy snow came down out of the mountains and locked the ranch in for 9 days. Della found herself in the kitchen one afternoon, kneading bread alone, except for Holt, who was mending a bridle at the table. The fire snapped. The wind moved the window pane. There was a stillness in the room that was almost a conversation in itself. She did not know what made her speak, except that the silence had become after 9 days a kind of pressure. "Mr. Hawthorne." He looked up. "Holt. I will call you Holt, if I may, since I am told there are 3 Mr. Hawthornes, and it gets confusing." He nodded. There was the faintest movement at the corner of his mouth. It was not a smile, but it was the place where a smile had once lived. "Holt, did your brother know me? Before I came here?" He shook his head no. "Did he know my father?" He held very still. He looked at her a long time. Then he wrote in his small notebook. He tore the page out. He passed it across the table. The page said, "We all knew your father, Mrs. Hawthorne. He was a good man. I am sorry for your loss." She read it. She read it again. Then she looked up at him, and what she saw in his face was something she did not have words for yet. Pain, yes, but also a kind of question. A kind of patient, terrible patience, as if he were waiting for her to ask one more thing, as if he were waiting and dreading at the same time. She did not ask. Not yet, because she was not yet brave enough to know. She folded the note. She put it in the pocket of her apron. She went back to the bread. That night she copied the note into the back of her blank journal, on the very last page, so it would be the hardest place for anyone else to find. She did not know yet why she felt it needed hiding. She only felt it. What she did not know was that 3 days before her arrival in November, her husband Wyatt and Mayor Augustus Thorne had stood on the back porch of the Hawthorne ranch house in the dark after the rest of the household had gone to bed. They had spoken for perhaps 15 minutes. Wyatt had not spoken much. Augustus had spoken most of it. What Della also did not know was that Hester Greaves, going out to throw water from the kitchen door at exactly the wrong moment, had heard one sentence of that conversation before she retreated indoors. The sentence was this: she must never know. Not what happened, not who did it, not where the papers are, or I swear to you, Hawthorne, the same thing happens to her. Hester Greaves had repeated that sentence to no one. She had made a promise on a dead woman's deathbed 11 years before. She had promised to wait until the right person came, and to know the right person when she saw her. Hester was not yet sure. Della had only just arrived. The girl was too quiet, too well-bred, too easily frightened. Hester would wait. That winter, She began to notice things, small things, things a young Boston girl might have missed if she had been any less alone or any less attentive. She noticed that Holt watched the road. Not every day, not in any predictable rhythm, but once or twice a week after supper, he would step out onto the porch with his coffee and stand in the cold and look down the long drive toward the gate. He was not waiting for anyone in particular. He was watching for someone in general. The difference was small. The difference was everything. She noticed that Wyatt kept his office locked, not just when he was inside it, when he was anywhere on the ranch. She noticed that there was a particular leather portfolio he carried with him on every ride. It went out with him at dawn, it came back with him at night, it never sat on a table, it never lay on a chair. She noticed that the silver workings in the lower canyon, which were said to belong to her husband, also seemed to belong in some half-spoken way she could not quite get at to Mayor Augustus Thorne. Twice she heard Wyatt say the word partner. Twice she heard him say it with the particular flat tone that men use when they mean the opposite of what the word means. She filed these things. She did not act on them. She was learning slowly that a woman in a strange house does well to be quiet first and curious second. The curiosity she could allow herself. The questions not yet. The garden in the East Plot was Della's first true triumph. It came together over the course of the spring, the summer, and the early fall of her first year of marriage. She planted in May. She watered through July. She lost some of it to a freak hailstorm in August. She replanted. She harvested in October with her own hands into baskets that Hester brought out from the kitchen and into the root cellar, one careful basket at a time. Wyatt came home one evening that October and found her on her knees in the dirt with mud on her cheek and a basket of turnips between her ankles. He stood at the edge of the path, looking at her. She did not see him at first. She was talking to herself low about whether the carrots needed another week. Mrs. Hawthorne. She looked up. She did not stand. She did not brush the mud away. Mr. Hawthorne, that is a fine garden. Thank you. You did it yourself. Yes. He stood there a moment longer. He nodded. He went into the house. It was not until much later that night, when she was already in bed with the lamp out, that Della realized her husband had paid her a compliment. The first one he had ever paid her. He had walked away too quickly for her to register it in the moment. It made her ache. She had told herself once she would not weep. She did not weep this time either. But she pressed her face into a pillow that smelled of lavender Hester had tucked in among the linens, and she let the ache out very quietly. Because he had seen her for a quarter of 1 minute. He had actually seen her, and then he had gone inside the house and shut the door of his office, and she had not seen him again for 2 days. The next morning, in the journal that nobody knew she kept, she wrote her first entry. That was not weather or a recipe. He saw the garden. He did not say my name, but for a moment when he was looking at it, I think he was looking at me. That entry would be one of 240 before she stopped writing. She did not know that yet either. There was a night in early April, just after the snow began to retreat from the meadow. When Della woke at 3 in the morning and could not get back to sleep, she got up. She put on a wrapper. She went down the back stairs to the kitchen for warm milk. The kitchen was not empty. Holt was at the table. He had a candle lit. He was looking at something he held in both his hands. He looked up when she came in. He did not move to hide what he was holding. It was a small leather wallet, a man's wallet. The leather was very old and very worn. It was open in his hands. "I am sorry," she said. "I will go." He shook his head. He set the wallet carefully on the table. He gestured for her to sit. She sat. She put her hands flat on the wood. The kitchen smelled of cooled stove iron and yesterday's bread. He picked up his pencil. He wrote in the notebook. He passed it across. The page said, "I am sorry to be in the kitchen at this hour. There are some nights it is harder than others. Tonight is one." She read it. She looked up at him. The candle was between them. His face in the candlelight looked younger than 30, and more tired than any 30-year-old should look. "What do you do on the nights it is harder?" he wrote. "I look at this." He turned the wallet toward her. There was nothing in the wallet but a single sepia photograph. A man and a woman sitting in the formal arrangement of a tintype. The man wore a dark suit. The woman wore a high collar. The man Della thought looked vaguely familiar, in the way that a stranger looks familiar when you have seen him in a dream. "Who are they?" He looked at her a very long moment. Then he reached for the notebook. He wrote. He passed it. The page said, "My mother and a friend of hers. The friend died 4 years ago. I keep his photograph because his daughter did not have one." Della felt the kitchen go still around her, the way a room goes still, right before something inside it tilts. His daughter. He did not write. He did not need to. She picked up the wallet with hands that were suddenly not quite steady. She tilted the photograph toward the candle. The man in the photograph was her father. She did not gasp. She did not cry out. She set the wallet down very carefully on the table. She looked at Holt Hawthorne. He looked back at her. "You knew my father." He nodded. "You knew him well." He nodded. "He was your mother's friend." He nodded. "My father did not have any friends in Colorado. He had never been here before he died." Holt picked up the pencil. His hand hesitated. Then it moved. The page said, "Your father had been to Silver Creek 3 times before he died, Mrs. Hawthorne. Each time my mother put him up at our house. He never told you because he meant to come home and tell you in person. He ran out of time. She read it twice, then a 3rd time. Then she folded the page very small and put it in the pocket of her wrapper." She stood up. She did not take the milk. She walked to the door of the kitchen and stopped with her hand on the frame and did not look back. "Mr. Hawthorne, Holt, there is going to come a day soon when I am going to ask you the rest of what you know." He nodded once. "On that day, will you tell me?" He nodded once more. She left the kitchen. She climbed the back stairs to her room. She put the folded page inside the back cover of her journal, next to the first note he had ever written her. She blew out her lamp. She did not sleep. She lay in the dark with her hands folded on top of the quilt, and she thought for the first time in 3 years. "I am not invisible. I am simply standing in a room where one of the 3 men in it has been waiting for me to ask." Year 2 passed differently. The garden grew larger. She learned the names of every hand on the ranch. She learned that Silas could be trusted with a secret if it was small. She learned that Holt could be trusted with a secret of any size, because he simply did not have anyone to tell. She also learned slowly that something was wrong in Silver Creek, not the kind of wrong a woman is meant to see. The kind a husband does not bring home in conversation, but she rode into town once a fortnight with Hester for supplies. And she had a Bostonian's ear for things that did not match. She heard mention of a foreclosure on the Pemberton ranch that nobody could quite explain. The Pembertons had paid their taxes faithfully for 30 years. She heard a clerk at the dry goods store ask another clerk why Mr. Davenport had sold his orchard so cheap. She heard the answer drop down to a whisper she could not quite catch. She heard her husband's name spoken in a tone she could not place. Not respect exactly, not fear exactly, something in between. Something that suggested Wyatt Hawthorne was a man on whose silence many other men's safety depended. She did not yet understand. but she filed every overheard scrap of it away in the corner of her mind where good Bostonian girls were taught to file things they did not understand but might need later. And every so often on those trips into town, she would feel Mayor Augustus Thorne's eyes on her from somewhere. Across the street, from the doorway of the bank, from the window of his office above the dry goods store. He would tip his hat to her if he caught her looking. He would smile his patient smile, and the small hairs at the back of her neck would rise the way they had the first day at the train station. She did not know why. She did not know what he had taken from her. She did not know what he intended to take. She only felt it. Year 3 was the year she stopped waiting. There was no single moment that decided it. There was the morning Wyatt walked past her in the upstairs hallway and did not say good morning. There was the evening he sat across from her at supper for an hour and looked through her so completely that when she finally said good night, he startled, as though he had forgotten she was at the table at all. There was the second anniversary of their wedding, which he did not mention, and which she chose to mention also as an experiment. He did not catch the omission. There was the night in March of that year when she had stood in the upstairs hallway after midnight listening at his office door, listening to the sound of him, drinking alone and turning over papers and saying nothing. And she had finally pressed her forehead against the wood and whispered almost too low to be a whisper at all. "I am here. I am right here." He had not heard her, or if he had given no sign. She had walked back to her own room. She had taken out her journal. She had written, "I am beginning to understand. He is not absent. I am invisible. There is a difference." After that night, things in her had begun to shift, quietly, the way a river shifts course over many small floods, none of them dramatic, until one morning a man rides out to where his ford used to be and finds it has moved 100 yards downstream. She still kept his house. She still hosted his suppers when he asked, which was not often. She still wore the gold band on her finger and answered to Mrs. Hawthorne at the dry goods store. But she stopped waiting at the window. She stopped listening for his footsteps in the hall. She stopped in the small, quiet way a woman stops hoping. It is a curious thing. Hope is heavy. Letting go of it is lighter than carrying it. But the lightness is its own kind of grief. She did not know it yet. But Hester Greaves had been watching her for 3 years. Hester had been waiting for one particular thing. Hester was waiting to see whether Della Whitmore was going to break, or whether Della Whitmore was going to harden. Hester wanted to be sure of the answer before she opened her mouth. In the October of the 3rd year, Hester got her answer. She found Della at the East Garden one cold morning, pulling the last of the carrots in a coat, with her hair pulled back with a kind of quiet around her that had nothing of the trembling of a young Boston bride about it any longer. Della was on her knees in the dirt, but she was not bent over. She was upright. She was working. Hester stood at the edge of the path with a basket on her hip. She watched a long moment. "Mrs. Hawthorne." "Yes, Hester. When you have finished with the carrots, would you come into my pantry for a moment? I have some pickling to start, and I find I need a second pair of hands." Della looked up. She read Hester's face. She did not at first know what she was reading, but she saw that the older woman was holding herself very still. The way a person holds herself still when she is about to say something she has been saving for a long time. "Yes, Hester, I will come. Thank you, Mrs. Hawthorne." Hester walked back toward the house with her basket. Della pulled the last 3 carrots. She brushed the dirt from her hands. She walked slowly toward the kitchen door. She did not yet know it, but she had just been called for. She had passed a test. She had not been told she was sitting. What she also did not know was that same morning, a rider on the ridge above the ranch had been watching her through a long brass glass. A man in a dark coat. He had lowered the glass after a moment. He had mounted his horse. He had ridden the back trail toward town to make a report. The report would be made to a man with a silver pocket watch and a patient smile. The report would say, "She is asking questions. The housekeeper has finally called her in. The thing you were afraid of is happening." And the man with the patient smile would set down his pen and consider for a long moment what it would cost him to silence a quiet woman. He would conclude by his own arithmetic that it would cost very little. He would be wrong, but that is the story of part 2. And part 2 begins on the other side of a pantry door. Was Della Whitmore ready for what Hester Greaves was about to tell her? Was she ready to hear how her father had really died? Was she ready to learn that the man she had married had known the truth all along and had kept it from her, and had told himself it was kindness when it was actually something far closer to cowardice? Stay with me, because the answers begin in part 2, and the answers, I promise you, are not what either of us would have guessed 3 years ago, when a Boston girl stepped off a train in a town called Silver Creek, with an ivory comb in her trunk, and no idea what was hidden inside the handle. I will see you on the other side of the pantry door. Hester Greaves did not begin with the truth. She began with tea. She set the kettle on the back of the stove. She measured leaves into a brown earthenware pot. She moved around the pantry as if she had something ordinary to do, which she did not. Della sat on the wooden stool by the work table and folded her hands in her lap and waited. She had learned in 3 years of marriage to a man who said nothing how to wait. She had learned that the person about to speak often needed silence more than questions. So she gave Hester the silence. The kettle whistled. Hester poured. She set a cup in front of Della. She set a cup in front of herself. She sat down across the work table. She wrapped both her hands around the cup as if her hands were cold, which they were not. "Mrs. Hawthorne." "Yes, Hester. I made a promise 11 years ago to a dying woman." Della did not move. The dying woman was the mother of the 3 brothers in this house. Her name was Adeline Hawthorne. She made me promise that when the right person came into this house, I would tell her certain things. She told me how I would know. She told me to wait. How would you know? She said, "The right person will be a woman who does not break." Della looked down at her tea. She watched the leaves settle. "I have not broken." "No, ma'am, you have not." Hester took a sip of her tea. She set the cup down. "Your father came to this house 3 times before he died. The first time was in 1876. He had come to Colorado to look into a silver claim. A claim that Mayor Augustus Thorne had offered him. A claim that Mayor Thorne said would make a man wealthy enough to retire. My father did not need to retire. He was a banker in Boston." "Yes, ma'am, he told us. He also told us that his daughter was 17 years old, and that he wanted to leave her enough money that nobody would ever be able to sell her for $1. Della felt her hands go cold around the cup. "My father loved me." "Yes, ma'am, he did. That is the part that I am sorry about, because he came to Silver Creek to make a fortune for you, and he found out that Augustus Thorne was running a fraud." "What kind of fraud?" "Land, silver claims, forged federal seals." The mayor was buying up small ranches at foreclosure auctions he had arranged himself. He was selling claims he did not own. Your father had loaned him $8,000 on the first trip. Your father came back the second time to find out where his money had gone. Your father did not find out. Not all of it. But he found out enough to make Augustus Thorne afraid of him. And then he came a third time, in the spring of 1878. He brought a ledger book with him. He brought letters. He brought everything he had been collecting for 2 years. He told my Adeline, quietly, in this kitchen, that he intended to take his evidence to a federal marshal in Denver. He told her he had hidden some of it in a place where Augustus Thorne would never think to look. He did not tell her where. Hester paused. She looked at Della very carefully, as if measuring whether the next sentence was one she was strong enough to receive. Your father did not get to Denver, Mrs. Hawthorne. He was killed in this town. He was pushed down the back stairs of the Silver Creek Hotel. The sheriff ruled it a drunken fall. The county coroner agreed. Augustus Thorne paid for the funeral. Della did not speak for a long moment. She set down her cup. She looked at the steam rising off it. She did not move. How do you know it was him? Because Holt was there. The name landed on the work table between them like a stone dropped from a height. Holt. Mr. Holt was the one who was supposed to ride with your father to Denver, ma'am. He volunteered. The Hawthorns did not love Augustus Thorne. The Hawthorns never have. Mr. Holt got to the hotel a quarter hour too late. He met 2 of Augustus Thorne's men on the back stairs as they were coming down. He drew on them. They drew on him. One of their bullets caught him at the side of the throat. The wound bled badly. It missed the great vein by less than an inch. He nearly bled to death on the kitchen floor of the hotel before our doctor got there. He has not spoken since. Della felt the kitchen tilt around her, the way a room tilts when it has decided to become a different room. He saved my father. He tried, ma'am. He did not succeed. He has lived with that for 4 years. I do not believe he has slept a full night since. And the others, Wyatt, Silas. Mr. Silas was the youngest of them by 12 minutes, ma'am. But he was at the South Workings the night your father died, miles from town. He has spent 4 years feeling that he should have been the one to ride to the hotel and not Holt. He carries a different kind of weight. Mr. Wyatt. Hester paused. Mr. Wyatt is a longer story. Tell me. Your husband, Mrs. Hawthorne, was in Denver when your father died. He had ridden ahead. He was supposed to meet your father and Mr. Holt at the federal marshal's office on the 3rd day. He waited 2 days. Then he rode back. By the time he reached Silver Creek, your father was buried, and your father's evidence was gone. Gone where? That is what your husband has spent the last 4 years trying to find out. Della stared at her. 4 years. Yes, ma'am. Then why? Why did he? She could not finish the sentence. She did not have to. Why did he marry you, ma'am? And then act as though you were nothing more than a guest in his house. Yes. Hester set down her cup. She folded her hands. She looked Della very directly in the eye for the first time in 3 years. Because Augustus Thorne offered you to him, as a gift, as a settlement, as in Thorne's own words, a kindness to your father's memory. Mr. Wyatt understood the moment he received that letter what Thorne was telling him. He was telling him that he knew, that he had known all along, that he was watching, that the price of Mr. Wyatt's continued silence was that he would take you in and treat you well and ask no further questions about your father's death. And the price of any inquiry, any question, any move toward Denver would be you. Della felt the cold come up from her hands into her chest, the cold of a thing being explained. He married me to keep me alive. Yes, ma'am. and he pushed me away because he was afraid that if he were seen to love me, Augustus Thorne would arrange another accident, ma'am. Yes. The kitchen was very quiet. The fire snapped once in the stove. The wind moved against the window. Della looked down at her gold ring, the ring she had worn for 3 years, the ring she had at moments hated, the ring she had at other moments simply stopped seeing. She turned it on her finger. Hester. Yes, Mrs. Hawthorne. Why are you telling me this now? Because you stopped waiting for him, ma'am. I saw it in you a month ago. You stopped listening at his door. You stopped flinching when he walked past. A woman who is still hoping cannot be told the truth. She will try to use it. She will try to confront him. She will get herself killed. But a woman who has stopped hoping, a woman who is calm, a woman who has decided to be her own person again, that woman can hear the truth and not act foolishly with it. You waited 3 years. I waited until you were ready, ma'am. Della stood up. She walked to the pantry window. She looked out at the east garden, at the bare brown earth where her carrots had been, at the bones of the bean trellis, at the place where she had become by her own hand somebody other than the girl who had stepped off the train. She did not turn around when she spoke. Hester. Yes, ma'am. There is something I want you to tell me, and I want you to tell me the truth. Always, ma'am. My father said he had hidden some of the evidence in a place where Augustus Thorne would never think to look. Did he tell my mother where? He did not, ma'am. Not in any letter we have found. Did he tell anyone? He may have told you, ma'am. He may have told you without you knowing he was telling you. Children, he used to say. Children always remember the small things their fathers thought were too small to remember. Della put her hand to her throat. She felt the small heat of her own pulse there. She turned around. Hester, bring me my ivory comb. Hester rose. She left the pantry. She came back 4 minutes later with a wooden box. Della opened the box. The comb lay inside on a folded square of velvet, the same comb her father had given her on her 16th birthday. She had carried it from Boston in her trunk. She had set it on her bedside table for 3 years. She had run it through her hair every morning of her marriage. She had never once looked at it twice. She picked it up now. She turned it in the light. The handle of the comb was carved from a single piece of ivory. It was a pale yellow now from age. The carving on the surface was a small repeating pattern of vines, a child's pattern, the kind of pattern a craftsman would use to make a daughter smile. She felt along the length of the handle. There, at the broad end, a small seam that her thumb would have brushed past 1,000 times without noticing. She pressed it. The handle of the comb unscrewed. A small, tightly rolled paper slipped out into her palm. She unrolled it. It was a single line of her father's handwriting. The hand she would have known if she had been blind and reading by touch. The line said, "The vault at the First National Bank of Denver, box number 74. The combination is the date of my wedding." Della stood very still. She could hear her own heart. She could hear Hester breathing across the kitchen. She could hear the fire snap in the stove. She could hear somewhere upstairs a door close. Her father had given her the answer at 16. He had put it into her hand. He had told her to wear it in her hair. He had told her never to lose it. She had not lost it. She had carried it across 3,000 miles. She had carried it through 3 years of marriage. She had run it through her hairs every morning while her husband ate his black coffee in the next room and refused to look at her. She had been carrying the key to her father's death the entire time. She laughed, a small, shocked, wet sound, the laugh of a woman who has just understood something so large that her body has not yet decided whether to laugh or to weep. She rolled the paper back up. She put it back inside the handle. She screwed the handle closed. Hester. Yes, Mrs. Hawthorne. Does anyone in this house besides you know what you have just told me? Mr. Holt knows what he knows. Mr. Wyatt knows what he knows. They have not spoken of it to each other in 3 years. They have not spoken of it to me. They have not spoken of it to anyone. And Mr. Silas. Mr. Silas knows that something happened, ma'am. He does not know what. He is the youngest. They have always protected him. Della nodded slowly. Hester, I am going to ask you to do something for me, and I am going to ask you not to ask why. Yes, ma'am. Tonight, after supper, I would like you to ask Mr. Holt to come to the kitchen at 10 o'clock. Alone. Tell him I will be here. Tell him I have something to show him. Yes, ma'am. Do not tell my husband. Hester paused only a half-breath. No, ma'am. That night the wind came down out of the high country with teeth in it. The first hard freeze of November, the kind of cold that closes a man's throat the moment he steps outdoors. The pipes whined under the kitchen floor. At 10 o'clock, Della was already at the work table. The candle was lit. The tea kettle was on. She had set out 2 cups. She had laid the ivory comb in the center of the table. Holt came down the back stair at 5 minutes past. He was still in his work shirt. His hair was damp at the temples from washing. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at the table. He looked at the comb. He looked at her. He did not need her to explain. He sat down. He laid both his hands flat on the wood. He waited. She unscrewed the handle. She rolled out the paper. She passed it across the table. He read it. He read it again. He read it 3 times. Then he put his right hand over his eyes, and his shoulders began to shake. He did not make a sound. He could not make a sound. He had not made a sound in 4 years. But his shoulders shook, and Della watched a 30-year-old man weep silently into his own palm. She reached across the table. She put her hand on his other hand. She did not say anything. After a long moment, he looked up. His eyes were red. His face was wet. He reached for his notebook with his free hand. He wrote 1 line. He passed it. The page said he hid it where he could not lose it. He hid it where they could not take it from him. He hid it in his daughter. Della read it. She nodded. She did not let go of his hand. Holt. He looked at her. I am going to Denver. He shook his head. I am, with or without help. Augustus Thorne has been allowed to keep my father's name in the dirt for 4 years. I am not going to allow it for 5. He shook his head harder. He reached for the pencil with his free hand. He wrote without taking his other hand out from under hers. The page said, If you go alone, you will not come back. He has people on the train. He has people at every bank in Denver. He has people in the marshal's office. We have to be smart. We have to be quiet. He nodded. Wyatt. He paused. Then he nodded again, slowly. He has to be told. Holt closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, There was something tired and old in them. He wrote. The page said, "He has been afraid for you for 3 years. If he learns what you have learned tonight, he will try to keep you from going. He will lock you in this house. He will mean it as protection. It will be a cage. Then we will not let him lock me in. Holt, hear me. I have been locked in this house for 3 years, and he did not need a door to do it. I am not afraid of him locking me in. I'm afraid of him not believing I am the one who has to do this." Holt looked at her a long moment. Then he nodded once. The page said, "Then we do it together, the three of us, and we do not tell Silas. He will want to come. He cannot." "Why?" the page said. "Because the youngest of us must remain. If any of us does not come back, one of us has to be here for Hester." Della folded the page. She put it in her pocket. She squeezed his hand once. She let it go. That night she did not sleep. She lay in her bed and looked at the dark ceiling and turned the new shape of her life over and over in her head. She had a husband who had loved her enough to push her away. She had a brother-in-law who had nearly died trying to save her father. She had a housekeeper who had waited 11 years for the right moment to tell the truth. She had a key in her ivory comb that opened a box in a vault in Denver. She had a mayor who had murdered her father and had been smiling at her on the street for 3 years. And she had at last the one thing she had not had since she stepped off the train. She had a reason. 3 days later, she did something she had not done in 3 years. She walked into her husband's office without knocking. He was at his desk. The leather portfolio was open in front of him. He looked up. His face did the thing she had watched it do 1,000 times. The shuttered look, the drawing back, the closing of every door. "Mrs. Hawthorne, Wyatt." He blinked. She had not called him by his given name in 2.5 years. He set down the pen. She closed the office door behind her. She walked to the chair across from his desk. She sat down. She put her hands flat on her knees. She looked at him. "I know." He went very still. "You know what, Mrs. Hawthorne? I know about my father. I know about Holt. I know about Augustus Thorne. I know about the $8,000. I know about the marriage. I know why you have not looked at me in 3 years. I know all of it." His face did not change, but the color drained out of it slowly, like watching the level of water fall in a glass. "Who told you?" "Hester. Damn her." "No." She said it quietly. She said it without heat. She said it the way a person says a fact. "No, Wyatt. Do not damn her. She did exactly what your mother asked her to do. She waited until I was ready, and I am ready. So now we are going to talk. Della." It was the first time he had called her Della in 3 years, maybe ever. She did not let it shake her. "You married me to keep me alive. You pushed me away to keep me alive. You have spent 3 years performing the part of a husband who does not care for me because you were afraid that if you cared visibly, the man who killed my father would kill me too. Is that the truth, or is it not?" He looked down at the desk. He did not answer for a long moment. Then he said, "It is the truth." "Did you ever consider telling me?" "Every day." "Why did you not?" "Because if you knew, you would have done what you are about to do." "Which is what?" He looked up at her. There was something in his face she had never seen there. Fear. Plain open, ordinary fear. "You are going after him." "I am going after my father's evidence. He will follow." "Della, do not. Do not talk me out of it. I am not going to talk you out of it. She paused. You are not. No. He stood up. He walked around the desk. He did not come close to her. He stopped halfway as if there were still a line he was not allowed to cross. He put his hands in his pockets. He looked at the floor. I have spent 4 years trying to find what your father hid. I have not found it. I have not been able to find it. And every month Augustus Thorne grows stronger. Every month he takes another ranch. Every month I sit in this office and pretend to be his partner in a silver claim that I do not own and that he is bleeding dry for fraud money. I have been a coward, Della. I have been a coward dressed up as a strategist. If you know where it is, if you have any way of finding it, then you go, and I go with you, and we end this. You will not lock me in this house. No, you will not ride ahead of me and tell me to wait. No, you will not. Wyatt, look at me. He looked at her. You will not treat me like a thing you are protecting. You will treat me like the only person in this story who has actually been carrying the answer. His mouth did something, almost a smile, not quite. All right, all right. She stood up. She crossed half the line. He had not crossed. She did not cross all of it. Not yet. She held out her hand, not for him to take, just to show. I have it in my room. The thing my father left. I am going to get it. I am going to show it to you, and then we are going to plan. He looked at her hand. He did not take it. He nodded. Della. Yes. I am sorry for 3 years. She thought about it. She thought about all the nights she had stood at his office door. She thought about all the breakfasts she had eaten alone. She thought about the journal under the bed. She thought about the way Holt had wept silently into his own palm. I am not ready to forgive you yet. I do not expect you to be. But I am ready to work with you. That is enough. It is going to have to be. She turned. She walked out of his office. She left the door open behind her. The next morning, Augustus Thorne came to the ranch. He came alone. He came in a black buggy. He came at 9 in the morning. He carried in a small leather case a sheaf of papers and a bottle of brandy. He came smiling. Della saw him from the kitchen window. She felt her hands go still in the bread dough. She did not breathe for a count of 3. Then she breathed. She wiped her hands on her apron. She walked out onto the porch. She got there before Wyatt did. She got there because Wyatt was at the barn. She got there alone. Augustus Thorne stepped down from the buggy. He removed his hat. Mrs. Hawthorne, forgive me for arriving unannounced. Mayor, I had hoped to find your husband at home. He is at the barn. I will send for him. In a moment. There is no rush. I confess I have not had the pleasure of speaking with you alone since the morning of your arrival. 3 years, is it? November the 2nd. You have a good memory, Mayor. For some things, ma'am. Yes. He smiled at her. The patient smile. The smile that had made her neck prickle on a station platform when she was 20 years old. It still made her neck prickle. But she stood inside the prickle now. She did not move away from it. What brings you, Mayor? A small matter of business, nothing that need concern you, although... He paused. He looked at her. He looked at her too long. Although what, Mayor? Although I had heard a rumor, I am sure it is nothing, but I had heard, in town, that a certain young Boston lady has been asking questions of the dry goods clerk about her father. Della did not move. She did not let her face move. She had been raised in a city where women were taught from the cradle to manage their faces in front of dangerous men. My father has been dead for 4 years, Mayor. I am sure I do not know what questions you are referring to. I am sure you do not, ma'am. A pause. A long pause. He held the pause longer than was polite. He held it until it became its own sentence. He was telling her he knew. He was telling her she should be afraid. She did not look away. I will send for my husband, Mayor. Please, come up onto the porch. There is a chair. It is cold. He climbed the porch steps. He sat in the chair she indicated. She turned and rang the iron bell that hung beside the kitchen door. From the barn, she saw a tall figure stop and look up, then begin walking fast toward the house. Augustus Thorne watched her ring the bell. He watched her watch her husband come. Mrs. Hawthorne. Yes, Mayor. You have grown into the role. What role is that? The role of mistress of a ranch. You did not have it when you arrived. You have it now. It suits you. Thank you, Mayor. It is a fragile thing, such a role. The frontier is harder on women than on men. The accidents that happen to women out here. Falls from horses, fevers, bad ice. It takes very little to lose. She felt her hands close on the railing of the porch behind her. She felt the wood under her palms. She did not turn around. She did not let her voice change. I am very careful, Mayor, about falls and ice. Of course you are. Of course. Wyatt came up the porch steps. He stopped at the top. His face had nothing in it. He had also been raised in his way to manage his face in front of dangerous men. Mayor, to what do we owe? Mr. Hawthorne, I will not keep you long. There is a small matter at the South Workings. I would prefer to speak of it indoors. Of course. The two men went into the office. The door closed. Della stood on the porch alone in the cold sun. She stood there for a long time. She did not realize she was shaking until her hand slipped from the railing and she had to grip it again. He had threatened her. He had threatened her on her own porch, with a smile, while accepting hospitality, with her husband 40 yards away. He knew she knew, or he knew enough, which meant they had less time than she had thought. That night she made one more decision. She made it alone. She did not tell Wyatt. She did not tell Holt. She did not tell Hester. She wrote a letter at her bedroom desk. By candlelight, she addressed it to Marshal Jeremiah Garrett, Office of the United States Marshal, City of Denver, State of Colorado. She wrote it in her own hand. She wrote it carefully. She did not sign it. She did not name the mayor by name. She knew it would not be enough to hide her, but it might be enough to slow him by a day. The paragraph said, "A vault box at the First National Bank of Denver, number 74, contains material evidence of land fraud and federal seal forgery in Las Animas County, Colorado Territory, dating from 1876 to the present. The combination is held by the daughter of the man who placed the materials. She is currently traveling to Denver to retrieve them. If she does not arrive within 20 days of the date of this letter, the materials are to be retrieved by federal warrant on the testimony of Mr. Holt Hawthorne of Silver Creek, who witnessed the murder of the man who placed them. Federal involvement at the territorial level is requested due to local corruption." She folded it. She sealed it with wax. She put it in the pocket of her dressing gown. The next morning she rode into town with Hester for supplies. She mailed the letter herself, from a post office 2 streets away from the dry goods store. She watched the postmaster stamp it. She watched him place it in the bag for Denver. She walked out into the cold November sun. She felt for the first time in 3 years that she was not waiting on a man to do a thing for her. She was doing the thing herself. She did not know yet that Augustus Thorne owned the postmaster. She did not know that the letter would never leave Silver Creek. She did not know that the postmaster would carry her envelope that afternoon, directly to the mayor's office. She did not know. But on the ride back to the ranch with Hester, silent beside her, and the wagon creaking under the load of flour and oil and salt, Della looked up at the ridgeline above the back trail. She saw a man on a horse there, watching them. He raised a brass glass to his eye. He held it. He lowered it. He turned the horse. He rode the back trail toward the south. Della watched him go. She did not point him out to Hester. She did not say a word. She kept her hands in her lap. She kept her face still. But inside, very quietly, she thought, "Then it has begun. Whatever the rest of this is, it has begun." And she thought of her father. She thought of the man she had not been allowed to bury. She thought of the way he used to read to her in the evenings in the brownstone in Boston, with his glasses pushed up on top of his head and his finger underneath the words. She thought of the morning of her 16th birthday, the way he had given her the ivory comb in its blue velvet box, the way he had pressed it into her palm and closed her fingers over it and said, "Cordelia, do not lose this. It is for keeping the things a woman needs to keep." She had thought he meant her hair. He had not meant her hair. She rode the rest of the way home with her hand in her pocket on the comb. She did not let go of it, not once, not for the 7 miles up the valley road, not when the wagon turned into the long cottonwood drive, not when she climbed down at the porch and walked into the house. She did not let go of it until she was alone in her room with the door closed. Then, she set it down very carefully on the bedside table, next to the Bible, next to the journal. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she said out loud to a room with nobody in it, "All right, Papa, we go now." Outside, the first thin snow of the year began to fall against the window. The flakes caught the lamplight as they came down. They covered the brown earth of the east garden in a thin, pale dust. They covered the path. They covered the tracks of the wagon she had come home in. By morning they would have to be shoveled. By morning Augustus Thorne would have read her letter. By morning the days she did not yet know she had would have begun to count down. And in a Denver hotel, 200 miles to the north, a federal marshal named Jeremiah Garrett would already be reading a different letter. A letter written 6 months earlier by a man named Wyatt Hawthorne that had not yet been answered. A letter that asked, in careful and lawyer-like prose, whether the federal authorities had ever investigated the death of a Boston banker named Edmund Whitmore in Silver Creek, Las Animas County in the spring of 1878. Marshal Garrett had been reading that letter off and on for 6 months. He had not been able to answer it. He had not had cause. He had filed it. He had remembered it. He would in 3 days receive a quiet word from a young clerk who worked under the Silver Creek postmaster, a man who did not love his mare as much as his mare believed he did. The clerk's word would be a single line. "The Whitmore girl is writing letters about a vault box and Thorne is intercepting them." Garrett would read the line. He would set down his pen. He would walk to the window of his office. He would look out at the snow falling on the Denver streets. Then he would call for his deputy, and he would say, "Get me every man we have. Something is coming down out of Las Animas County. and we need to be ready when it walks through that door." But Della did not know any of that. Not yet. She only knew that night that she had sent a letter, that the snow was falling, that her husband had not crossed the line in his office, that her brother-in-law had wept silently into his own palm, that a mayor had stood on her porch and threatened her over a cup that she had not offered to fill, and that somewhere down in the valley, in the lamplight of a study with a heavy silver pocket watch ticking on the desk, a man with vacant eyes was reading her unsent letter for the second time. Slowly, carefully, with the kind of attention a careful man pays to a thing he has already decided to destroy. The barn caught fire at 4 o'clock in the morning. Della woke to the smell first. Wood smoke, then horses. The high, terrible scream of a horse that knows the thing it cannot escape. She was out of bed before her mind had caught up with her body. She was at the window. She was looking down. The barn was a wall of orange. The night was orange. The snow on the ground was orange. Men were running. Silas was running. Hester was running with buckets. Holt was inside the barn. She could see him through the open door. She could see him cutting at the lead ropes of the 3 horses still in their stalls. She ran for the stairs in her nightgown and her wrapper. She did not stop for boots. She did not stop for a coat. She came out the kitchen door into the cold and the smoke and the noise. She grabbed a bucket. She ran for the well. Wyatt was at the well already. He turned. He saw her. "Get back in the house." "No. Della." "I said no." She drew the bucket up. She handed it to him. She lowered the bucket again. He looked at her 1/2 second. Then he ran with the bucket toward the barn. The fire took 2 hours to put out. They saved 2 of the 3 horses. They lost 1 mare and the entire west side of the barn and 400 pounds of hay. They saved the cattle because the cattle were in the south corral and the wind was blowing east. Holt was the last man out of the barn. He came out at the very end with his shirt smoking at the shoulder and a long black smear of soot down the side of his face. He had a length of leather rein still wrapped around his fist. He sat down on the bottom rail of the corral fence. He put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. He did not make a sound. Della went to him. She sat down beside him on the rail. She did not touch him. She did not ask him to look up. She just sat. She put her hand flat on the wood of the rail beside his hand. She left it there. So if he wanted to reach, he could. After a long minute, he reached. He took her hand. He held it. They sat that way until the sky went gray, until the smoke thinned, until Silas walked over with 2 cups of coffee and gave 1 to each of them and walked away again without speaking. Then Wyatt came. He stood in front of them. He looked down at Della. He looked at her bare feet in the snow, at the hem of her nightgown soaked black to the knee, at the burn on the inside of her wrist where a bucket handle had bitten her. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he said, "It was him. I know. He is telling us he can reach us. I know. It was a warning. It was a warning." Wyatt looked at Holt. Holt nodded once. Wyatt looked back at Della. Della, yes. "We have to go tonight." She nodded. She did not let go of Holt's hand. The packing took the rest of the daylight. They packed quietly. Hester moved through the kitchen, putting bread and dried apples and cold ham into oiled paper. She put a pint of whiskey in for the wound that none of them had taken yet, but one of them almost certainly was going to. Silas knew by noon. He came into the kitchen. He stood in the doorway. He looked at the saddlebags on the work table. He looked at his eldest brother. "You are going?" "Yes." Without me? Yes. Why? Because one of us has to be here. Because of Hester. Because of the ranch. Because if none of us come back, somebody has to be the one who buried us. Silas did not speak for a long time. He looked down at his boots. He had the same steel gray eyes as his brothers. They were wet. Wyatt. Yes. If you do not come back, I will kill him myself. I know you will. Silas nodded once. He turned, he walked out of the kitchen. He did not slam the door. He closed it very softly, which was somehow worse. They left at dusk. The snow had stopped. The road was packed hard. 3 horses, 3 riders. Della on the bay mare she had grown to like in the 2nd year. Wyatt on his black gelding. Holt on the chestnut. They did not light a lantern. They rode under the stars, down the valley road, past the cottonwoods, past the dark windows of farmhouses where people slept who did not know that the woman riding past on a bay mare was carrying the death of their mayor in the handle of an ivory comb in her saddlebag. They reached the rail spur at Bent's Crossing by midnight. They tied the horses behind the station. They paid a sleeping clerk a $5 gold piece to forget that he had seen them. They boarded the northbound milk train at 1 in the morning in a freight car with 2 crates of dairy and a sleeping dog. The dog did not wake. The train pulled out. The lights of Bent's Crossing receded. Della sat on a crate in the dark and watched the country go past through the open door. Wyatt sat across from her. Holt sat by the door with the latch in his hand. She had never been on a train at night before. The countryside was strange. The mountains were a long black wall to the west. The plains were a long flat nothing to the east. The stars were close. She thought about her father. She thought about him on the night train from Boston, 4 years before riding west to Denver in a passenger car instead of a freight car with a small leather portfolio on his lap. She thought about how, at this exact moment of that night, he would have been about 90 miles north of where she was sitting now, riding toward the same city, for almost the same reason. She put her hand in her pocket. She felt the comb. "Hello, Papa," she thought. "I am behind you. I am coming." They reached Denver at dawn. The city was bigger than she had remembered from her 3-day stop on the way to Silver Creek 3 years before. Smokier, louder, carriages everywhere, men in suits that did not look like Boston suits, women in hats she did not understand. The First National Bank stood on the corner of 16th and Larimer Streets, a square stone building with brass doors and a clock above the entrance that said it was 9:15. The bank opened at 10. They had 45 minutes. They stood across the street under the awning of a chop house. The smell of frying bacon came out the open door. Della had not eaten since the previous afternoon. She did not feel hungry. She did not feel anything except a high humming behind her ears. Wyatt was watching the bank. "There are 2 men at the corner, one in a brown coat, one in a black. Thorns. Yes. How did they? Train. Faster horses on the through road. They have been here an hour. What do? We wait. For what? For the bank to open. For people to go in. We do not go in first. We do not go in last. We go in the middle when there are enough people inside to make a scene cost too much." She nodded. He looked at her. "Della." "Yes. When we get inside, you go to the vault clerk. You speak to him in your Boston accent. You speak to him politely. You do not run. You do not look around. You do not look for me. Holt and I will be in the lobby. We will not appear to know you. If anything happens, if anything starts, you drop to the floor. You stay there. You do not stand up. All right. And Della. Yes. If something happens to me, and not to you, you take the box. You take it to the United States Marshal's office, 18th and Stout. You ask for Marshal Garrett. You do not stop. You do not look back. You do not come back for me. She looked at him. She held the look for a long moment. Wyatt. Yes. I am not going to leave you on a bank floor. You are if I tell you to. No, I am not. So do not get shot. He almost smiled. He did not quite. At 10 o'clock, a clerk came out and unlocked the brass doors. People began to file in. A woman with a basket. 2 men in business suits. An elderly couple. A young clerk from another firm in a stiff collar carrying a leather satchel. Wyatt nodded. Della crossed the street. She walked into the lobby of the First National Bank of Denver on the morning of November the 17th, 1882, at 3 minutes past 10 in the morning, in a dark traveling dress and a small black hat and a pair of gloves she had borrowed from Hester. She walked the way her mother had taught her to walk. Heel first, shoulders back, eyes on the desk she meant to reach. She did not look at the man in the brown coat by the door. She did not look at the man in the black coat by the marble pillar. She did not look at her husband when he came in behind her with Holt and stood at the counter as if waiting for a teller. She walked to the desk at the back of the lobby where a small brass sign said Vault Inquiries. The clerk was an older gentleman with white side whiskers and steel-rimmed spectacles. He looked up. He smiled the professional smile of a man who has seen everything but is paid to act as though every customer is the most important he has ever met. "Good morning, madam." "Good morning. I have a vault box." "The number, please." 74. He nodded. He turned to a ledger book. He ran his finger down a column. He stopped. He looked up. "Box 74. Registered to Mr. Edmund Whitmore of Boston, Massachusetts. Mr. Whitmore is the only signatory, madam." Mr. Whitmore was my father. He has been deceased for 4 years. I have written documentation of his death and a notarized copy of his will which names me his sole heir. I have it here. She placed an envelope on the desk. She had had it ready since Boston. She had not opened it since. The clerk read it. He read the will. He read the death notice from the Boston paper. He read the notarized affidavit. He took his time. She felt the seconds. She did not let her hands move. He looked up. "I see, madam. And the combination. 27 August, 57. He blinked. "That is unusual, madam. It is my parents' wedding date." "I see." He stood. He bowed slightly. He gestured. "If madam will follow me." She followed him. She did not look back. She did not see the man in the brown coat take 1 step away from the door. She did not see Wyatt step in front of him at the counter and ask very loudly and very politely where one might purchase a draft on the Bank of St. Louis. She did not see Holt drift across the lobby toward the man in the black coat, with both hands very visibly empty at his sides. She walked through a low brass gate, down a marble hallway, into a small room with a heavy iron door at the far end. The clerk produced a key. He turned it in the door. He opened the door. He stood aside. "Box 74 is on the second shelf, third from the left. The dial is on the front. The bank does not retain the combination. I will be just outside the door, madam." "Thank you." He bowed. He stepped out. He closed the door. She stood alone in a small stone room full of metal drawers. She walked to the second shelf. She found the third drawer from the left. She turned the dial. 27, 8, 57. Right, left, right. The drawer clicked. She pulled it open. Inside was a leather portfolio, larger than her two hands, heavier than it looked. She lifted it out. She set it on the small table in the center of the room. She opened it. Inside, a bound ledger book, 6 inches thick, the pages dense with her father's handwriting. Columns of figures, names of ranches, dates of foreclosures, notations in red ink of when each foreclosure had been arranged in advance with a man named A.T. beneath the ledger. A bundle of letters tied with brown string. Letters in Augustus Thorne's hand. Letters on his official mayor's stationery. Letters discussing the forging of federal land seals. Letters discussing the suppression of competing claims. Letters that named by initial the sheriff of Las Animas County, the coroner, the county clerk, and the postmaster of Silver Creek. Beneath the letters, a single folded sheet, sealed with red wax, addressed in her father's hand. To my daughter Cordelia, on the morning of my death. She did not open it. She could not yet. She put it in the inside pocket of her dress, against her ribs, where she could feel it. She closed the portfolio. She tucked it under her arm. She stood for one moment alone in that stone room, with her father's life and his death in a leather case against her side, with the smell of old paper and iron and stone, with her heart beating in her ears like a drum. Then she walked to the door. She lifted her chin. She opened it. She walked back down the marble hallway. She walked through the low brass gate. She walked into the lobby. She kept walking. She kept her eyes on the brass doors at the front of the lobby. Nothing else existed. Not the brown coat, not the black coat, not her husband, only the doors and the cold street beyond them. She crossed the marble floor in her borrowed gloves with $200,000 of evidence in her arms. She pushed out through the brass doors. She came down the granite steps. She stepped into the cold Denver street. She turned left. She walked 1 block. She did not run. She did not look back. At the corner of Larimer and 15th, she turned again. At Champa Street, she turned a 3rd time. By the time she reached 18th and Stout, she was walking very fast. Her gloves were damp. Her breath was clouding in front of her face. She climbed the steps of the federal building. She pushed through the doors. She stopped at the front desk inside. I would like to see Marshal Jeremiah Garrett. I have material evidence of land fraud and murder in Las Animas County. I would like to deliver it now. The clerk at the desk looked up at her. He was perhaps 30. He had the face of a man who had not been surprised by anything for a long time. He was about to be surprised. He stood up. Yes, ma'am. Marshal Jeremiah Garrett was a tall man in his late 50s with iron-gray hair cut very short and a mustache trimmed close enough to look respectable in a federal building. He wore a dark blue suit with a star pinned to the lapel. He had been a deputy in Kansas during the war. He had been a marshal in Colorado for 11 years. He had read every word of Wyatt Hawthorne's letter 6 times. He came out of his inner office at a walk that was not quite a run. He stopped when he saw Della. He looked at the leather portfolio. He looked at her face. He bowed very slightly. Mrs. Hawthorne, you know who I am. I have been waiting to meet you for about 6 months, ma'am. Please, come inside. She followed him into the inner office. He closed the door behind them. He gestured to a chair. She did not sit. She set the portfolio on his desk. She opened it. She said one sentence. She said, "My father was Edmund Whitmore. Mayor Augustus Thorne of Silver Creek murdered him on the back stair of the Silver Creek Hotel on the night of April 4th, 1878. The witness is my brother-in-law, Mr. Holt Hawthorne, who was shot in the throat that same night in the same hotel by Thorne's men. The evidence is here. I want him hanged." Marshal Garrett looked at her a long moment. Then he sat down. He drew the ledger toward him. He opened it. He read 3 pages. He looked up. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I am going to need you to sit down, because I am going to be asking you a great many questions for a great many hours, and then I am going to ride to Silver Creek with 6 men, and we are going to arrest your mayor." She sat down. She unbuttoned her gloves. She set them on the desk beside the ledger. The arrest of Mayor Augustus Thorne took place on the morning of November the 22nd, 1882, at 10 minutes past 9. He was sitting at his desk in the town hall. He was reading a paper. He had a cup of coffee at his elbow. He had a cigar in the ashtray. Marshal Garrett opened the door. He walked in. 6 deputies followed him. 2 of them were Pinkertons. 1 was a federal court officer. 2 more were deputy marshals from Denver. The last was a man from the territorial governor's office. Wyatt Hawthorne and Holt Hawthorne stood in the doorway behind them, and behind both Hawthornes, in a dark traveling dress with the leather portfolio against her side, stood Cordelia Whitmore. Augustus Thorne looked up from his paper. He looked at the marshal. He looked at the badge. He looked at the 6 men. He looked at the Hawthornes. Then he looked at her. For the first time in 3 years, the patient smile did not come. The face under the smile did. The face was older than the smile. The face was tired. The face had small, mean eyes. "Mrs. Hawthorne, Mayor, Cordelia, do not call me that. You are about to make a mistake. No, you do not know what you are doing, child." "I know exactly what I am doing." She walked into the room. She walked past the marshal. She walked to his desk. She set the portfolio down on top of his paper. She opened it. She turned it around to face him. She tapped a single page with 1 gloved finger. "This is my father's writing. Augustus, this is the $8,000 he loaned you. This is the date you paid it back, which is the date you did not pay it back, which is the date you killed him for it. Instead, this is the federal seal you forged. This is the letter you wrote to the sheriff. This is the letter you wrote to the coroner. This is the letter you wrote to the postmaster, instructing him to intercept any letter sent by me to a federal address." He did not look at the pages. He looked at her. "You have been a very disappointing young woman. And you have been a very predictable old man." The marshal stepped forward. "Augustus Thorne, by the authority of the United States government and the territorial governor of Colorado, I am placing you under arrest for the murder of Edmund Whitmore, the attempted murder of Holt Hawthorne, the fraudulent foreclosure of 19 ranch properties in Las Animas County, the forgery of 7 federal land seals, and the corruption of 3 sworn officers of the county court. Stand up, hands where I can see them." Augustus Thorne stood up. He held out his hands. The marshal cuffed him. He looked at Della as the cuffs went on. "You will not see this through, ma'am. There are people in Denver. There are people in Washington. You think you have won. You have not won. You have only made the next men more careful." "That is fine, Mayor. I am not afraid of the next men. I have time." They walked him out of the town hall in cuffs. Word had spread fast in the way word spreads in a small town. Half of Silver Creek was in the street. They watched in silence as their mayor was walked down the steps of his own town hall and put into a federal wagon by federal officers. Della stood on the porch. She did not wave. She did not speak. She watched the wagon turn at the end of the street. She watched it disappear north down the Denver road. A woman she did not know stepped out of the crowd, an older woman in a brown shawl. She walked up to Della. She put a hand on her arm. "Mrs. Hawthorne, that was my husband's ranch, on page 11. I know. Thank you. You are welcome, ma'am." The woman did not let go of her arm for a long moment. Then she did. She walked back into the crowd. The crowd stayed. Other women came forward. Some men came forward. Some did not come forward but tipped their hats from across the street. Some did neither. Augustus Thorne had been a powerful man. He had owned more than land. He had owned silence. The silence was breaking in front of Della's eyes, one ranch wife at a time. She did not yet know how much it would still cost her. 6 days later, in the cold dawn at the rail spur outside Silver Creek, a man stepped down from the morning train carrying a Colt .44 in a low-slung holster and wearing a face that almost everyone in town would recognize. He had the same small, mean eyes as Mayor Augustus Thorne. He was older. He was harder. He was the mayor's elder brother, Cyrus Thorne, who had spent the last 15 years running a gun house in Cheyenne and had not been back to Silver Creek since their father's funeral. He had received the telegram about his brother's arrest the night before. He had been on the morning train. He went straight to the town hall. He found it locked. He went to the saloon. He found half a dozen men he had not seen in 15 years and bought them whiskey and listened to their stories. By noon, he had the full account. By 2 in the afternoon, he knew the names of every Hawthorne brother and the name of the Whitmore girl. By 3, he had hired 2 men from a livery in the next town over to ride up to the Hawthorne ranch with him at dusk. Hester Greaves saw the riders coming from the kitchen window at 6 o'clock. She did not panic. She had been waiting for something like this for 11 years. She had a routine. She walked to the back of the house. She opened the gun cabinet that had belonged to Adeline Hawthorne's husband. She took down a double-barrel shotgun. She loaded both barrels. She handed it to Silas. "They're coming up the drive, 3 of them. Cyrus Thorne and 2 others. Where are Wyatt and Holt?" "In the south pasture with most of the hands. They will not get here in time." "Where is Della?" "In the east garden. She does not know." "Hester." "Yes, Silas. Get her in the cellar." "No, Silas. She does not go in the cellar." "What?" "She has earned the right to be on the porch when it comes to her door." Silas looked at the old woman for a long moment. He nodded. He cocked the shotgun. The 3 riders came up the long drive in the dusk. Cyrus Thorne in the front on a tall gray horse. 2 hired men behind him on bays. They rode at a walk. They did not hurry. They wanted to be seen. Della was in the east garden when she heard the hooves. She straightened up. She walked around the corner of the house with dirt on her hands in her work apron to the foot of the porch steps. She stopped there. She did not climb the steps. Silas was at the top of the steps with the shotgun across his arm. Hester was beside him. Hester held a small revolver Della had never known she owned. The 3 riders stopped 20 feet from the porch. Cyrus Thorne raised his hat. "Mrs. Hawthorne, Mr. My name is Cyrus Thorne. I am the brother of the man you put in a federal wagon 6 days ago. I am sorry for your loss. He is not dead, ma'am. He will be." Cyrus Thorne smiled. It was not patient. The Thorne brothers had the same teeth. They did not have the same smile. "You have a sharp tongue, ma'am, for a Boston girl. 3 years on a ranch will do that. I have come to make an arrangement. There will be no arrangement. You have not heard my offer. I do not need to. Mrs. Hawthorne, I am a reasonable man. My brother had business interests in this town. Those interests now have no head. I am prepared to assume them. I am prepared to forget that you exist. In exchange for that, you return the materials you removed from a vault box in Denver to me, quietly, before the federal trial. No, Mrs. Hawthorne. No, Mr. Thorne. He looked at her. She looked at him. The two hired men shifted their hands toward their hips. Silas raised the shotgun. Hester raised the revolver. Mr. Thorne, Silas said, I am a slow shot, but this here gun is not very particular, so I would advise your men to move their hands. Cyrus Thorne looked at the porch. He looked at the youngest Hawthorne with the shotgun. He looked at the housekeeper with the revolver. He looked at the Boston woman at the foot of the steps with dirt on her hands. He made the same mistake his brother had made 2 weeks earlier. He decided Della was the soft thing in the picture. He drew his Colt. He drew it fast. He drew it at her. 3 things happened at once. Silas fired. The shotgun went off into the air over Cyrus Thorne's head as Silas adjusted his aim, because Silas was not a killer, and would never be one, and the shot went wide on purpose, to give him 1 more half-second. Hester fired. The revolver hit Cyrus Thorne in his right shoulder. He dropped the Colt. And Della picked up the iron coal shovel that was leaning against the porch step beside her. She turned. She swung it. With every inch of 3 years of silence, and 4 years of grief, and 23 years of being told she was a thing to be exchanged. She swung the iron coal shovel, and she hit Cyrus Thorne across the side of his head as he reeled from Hester's bullet. He went off the horse sideways and hit the frozen ground and did not move. The 2 hired men were already turning their horses to run. Silas put the second barrel into the dirt in front of the lead horse. Both men stopped. Both men raised their hands. Della stood over the unconscious body of Cyrus Thorne with the shovel still in her grip. She was breathing hard. Her hair had come loose from its pin. There was a smear of black coal dust on her cheek where the shovel had grazed her. She looked down at him. She said very quietly to nobody, and to him and to the entire mountain, "You should not have come for me at my own door." Wyatt and Holt came up the South Drive at a full gallop. 90 seconds later, they drew up sharp at the porch. They took in the 3 downed men, the hot shotgun, the smoking revolver, the coal shovel in Della's hand, the blood on Cyrus Thorne's shoulder and forehead, the breath fogging from his nostrils, which meant he was alive. Wyatt swung down. He walked to her. He did not touch her. He looked at her for a long moment. He looked at the shovel in her grip. He said 1 word. "Della." "Wyatt, you hit a man with a coal shovel." "Yes, while he had a .44 pointed at you. He had it pointed at me. I had a shovel pointed at his head. Mathematically, mister, I was the better armed of the 2 of us." Wyatt's face did something very rare. The corner of his mouth lifted. It became a smile. A real smile. The first one she had ever seen on him. He took the shovel out of her hand. He set it down very gently against the porch step. Then he did something else he had not done in 3 years. He pulled her against him. He wrapped both his arms around her. He put his face into her hair, and he held on to her for a long count in front of his brother, and his housekeeper, and his unconscious enemy, and the cold November dusk. And she felt against the side of her face, his shoulders shaking. The shoulders of a man who had been afraid for 3 years. The shoulders of a man who had finally been allowed to put the fear down. She did not let him hold her too long. She pulled back, not hard, just enough. She looked up at him. Wyatt. Yes, I am still not ready to forgive you. He nodded. But, I am ready to be in the same room with you, for longer than supper. All right. And I am ready to keep my plate at the table next to yours. His face did the thing again, the almost smile. All right. The federal trial of Augustus Thorne took place in Denver in the second week of December 1882. It lasted 4 days. Cordelia Whitmore Hawthorne testified for 6 hours on the second day. Holt Hawthorne testified through written affidavit and notebook on the third day. Wyatt Hawthorne testified on the fourth. The jury came back in 80 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Augustus Thorne was sentenced to die. He met his sentence on the morning of January the 11th, 1883, at the federal yard in Denver. Della did not attend. She had said her piece. She did not need to watch the man go. She had what she needed. She had her father's name back. Cyrus Thorne was tried separately for attempted murder. He went to the territorial prison at Canyon City for 20 years. He did not survive 8 of them. The 19 foreclosed ranches were one by one returned to their original families by federal order over the course of the following year. Mrs. Pemberton came to the Hawthorne Ranch the day her deed came back. She did not say thank you. She sat down at the kitchen table and she cried for 40 minutes. And then she got up and she said, "Mrs. Hawthorne, I made you a pie. It is in the wagon." And she walked out and brought in a peach pie. The peaches were from a jar she had been saving since before her husband had lost the ranch. She had been saving them, she said, for the day she got it back. Della cried then. She cried for the first time in many months. She cried the way a woman cries when the wrong thing has finally been made right. Hester cried with her. Hester did not say anything. Hester just sat. That spring, Della did 3 things. The first thing, she opened the sealed letter her father had written to her on the morning of his death. She opened it alone in the east garden. On the first day the ground was soft enough to plant in. It was a short letter. It said, "My dear girl, if you are reading this, then I did not come home. I am sorry for that. I had hoped to be the kind of father who came home. I want you to know 2 things. The first is that the world is not as terrible as it will seem to you in this moment. There are good men and good women in it. Look for them. Stay near them. The second is that you have always been braver than you have ever known yourself to be. Whatever you do next, trust the brave thing. It is the truer thing. With all my love, your father." She folded the letter. She put it in the pocket of her apron. She kept it there for the rest of her life. The second thing, she bought a building on the north side of Silver Creek, a 2-story building with a wide front porch. She used the money that came back to her as her father's heir after the federal court settled his estate. She did not buy it for a house. She bought it for a school, a small school, for women on the frontier who had not been taught to read, for widows and ranch wives and a few young girls whose fathers had said school was not for daughters. She hired 1 teacher from Denver. She taught 2 days a week herself. By the end of the first summer, there were 11 students. By autumn, there were 16. The third thing, she moved her plate at the supper table. Not next to Wyatt's plate, not across from his plate, not back to the lonely one, setting it had been the night this story began. She set 4 plates every night. Hers, Wyatt's, Holt's, Silas's. Hester ate with them on Sundays. On Sundays there were 5 plates. She did not, for the rest of that year, decide which of 3 things she was going to be. She did not decide whether to forgive her husband for 3 years of frightened silence. She did not decide whether the way Holt looked at her across the kitchen at night was love or gratitude or something quieter that did not have a word in English yet. She did not decide whether the way Silas teased her about her shovel and laughed his big, easy younger brother laugh meant she had finally been welcomed into a family she had been a stranger in for 3 years. She did not decide. She made bread. She tended the garden. She taught a Wednesday morning class in arithmetic to 14 women who had not been allowed to know what arithmetic was. She rode into town with Hester. She rode home. She slept in her own bed at the top of the stairs. She did not invite her husband into that bed. She did not visit his. She was in no hurry. She had hurried once into a marriage license in 14 minutes. She did not intend to hurry into anything else for a very long time. One Tuesday in October of 1883, almost exactly a year from the night this story began, Cordelia Whitmore Hawthorne walked into her dining room before supper. She looked at the table. She looked at the 4 place settings. She thought about the Tuesday. She'd removed one of them. She thought about the woman she had been then. She thought about the woman she was now. She thought about the comb on her bedside table upstairs, the Bible, the journal which she had not written in for 6 months now, and did not feel the need to. She thought about her father's letter in her apron pocket. She lifted a 5th plate from the sideboard. She did not need it. There was no 5th person coming. She set it down anyway, at the head of the table, across from her own. She did not know who she was setting it for. Maybe a future child, maybe a future neighbor, maybe the memory of her father, who had given her an ivory comb on her 16th birthday, and told her it was for keeping the things a woman needs to keep. She did not know. She did not need to know. She heard the back door open. She heard Hester's voice in the kitchen. She heard the boots of 3 men coming up the porch steps. Wyatt, Holt, Silas. The 3 identical men who had stood at the door of this house on the November evening she had first arrived, and who had been in their 3 different ways the slowest and the strangest and the most surprising piece of her life. They came into the dining room one after the other. They saw the 5 place settings. They did not ask. They sat down, each in his own chair, Wyatt at his end, Holt on the long side, Silas across from Holt, the 5th plate the empty one at the head. Della came in last. She sat down in her chair. She picked up her napkin. She unfolded it. She looked at the 4 men who were not the man across from her at the head of the table, and at the empty plate that was waiting for nothing in particular. She thought about the last line of the story she had been told her life was supposed to be. The line that said, "And the woman chose." The line that said, "And the man saved her." The line that said, "And she was his." She thought, "No, that is not how my story ends." She thought, "My story ends with a plate I set for myself, and a plate I set for the people I have chosen to feed, and a plate I set for whoever has not yet arrived, and I do not know who will sit there, and I do not need to know yet, because for the first time in my life I am the one who will decide." She picked up her fork. She began to eat. Outside, somewhere up on the ridge, the first snow of the new winter began to fall. It came down very lightly. It covered the brown earth of the east garden in a thin, pale dust, the same way it had a year before when a letter had not been mailed and a fire had not yet been lit, and a Boston girl had not yet picked up a coal shovel. Inside, in a warm dining room in a house at the top of a long cottonwood drive in Silver Creek, Colorado Territory, on a Tuesday evening in October of 1883, 5 plates sat on a table. 4 people ate. 1 plate waited, and Cordelia Whitmore Hawthorne, 24 years old, mistress of her own life for the first time, looked up at the people she had chosen to be at her table and smiled.